Series 4 or 5 tier list time for Marvel Snap. Let's go ahead and talk about what are the best cards to pick up with your valuable resources and why. We kick off with our archetype defining and strong cards. I think all of the cards in this group are excellent candidates for being some of your first priority pickups in Marvel Snap. They all unlock new decks for you to play and tend to be quite strong in the metagame. Airshim is our first card in this category. He is unique and powerful and provides a play experience like none other in Marvel Snap. If you want your gameplay to be varied while doing some consistently powerful things ahead of curve, Airshim is a great pickup. Up next, we have Darkhawk, consistently one of the best cards in Marvel Snap since it was added to the game, along with Rock Slide, Korg, and Black Widow as enablers to scale his stat line up. Darkhawk sees play in a variety of decks on his own, and he acts as a tech card now against decks that are larger, such as Erishim, who we just looked at. Next up is Gilgamesh, the premier headlining large stat stick for Zoo decks ever. I actually think if you're a newer Marvel stat player, this is a pretty reasonable early pickup for you since the other cards that synergize with Gilgamesh you're going to have in your early series. That being said, he is narrow, basically only shining in that one deck. Mockingbird is a truly powerful card with a fairly nominal build around requirement. We see her as a cheap stat stick in decks like Erishim as well as Zoo, enabled by Squirrel Girl, as well as slotted into a variety of other places with Mysterio as a singular powerful enabler. Hawkeye, Kate Bishop, and Marvel Boy are not only young Avengers together, but I think they make a lot of sense to talk about together in today's ratings video. Both of these cards slot cleanly into something like Gilgamesh Zoo as powerful new tools for that, but they also slot together in a variety of other places, with Kate's arrows providing crucial one energy bodies for Marvel Boy to pump up over the course of the game. Kate is definitely the more flexible of these two, also serving as an enabler for Mockingbird and just a general utility card in other decks like Bounce as well. Up next, we have three higher series cards that are often found in unison together: Kitty Pryde, Hope Summers, and Athena. These three, frequently accompanied by beginner series card Angela, are a scaling threat package that also provides you with extra energy that can fit into a variety of shells. If you are someone who enjoys decks that have lots of sequencing decisions and figuring out optimal play permutations in the final turns of the game, these three are quite powerful when paired together. Gwenpool is a fairly generically strong Marvel Snap card who at face value is a 4/12, but who scales up to being much larger than that when combined with synergy pieces such as Brood or Mysterio. She's found a fairly permanent home inside of Silver Surfer decks, but she also powers a lot of B and C tier decks that are a ton of fun as well, such as Hand Buff. I think Deborah is actually one of the most powerful 5 energy cards in Marvel Snap, and since she released, various decks featuring her have consistently been putting up some of the top performing metrics in every format while having fairly low play rates. She has pretty critical sequencing decisions that you're forced to make during the early turns of the game, so you can set her up to be 16 points worth of stats for just 5 energy, but not only is she a really efficient rate at face value, but she also gets into huge combos when paired with things like Wong and Odin. White Widow is easily one of the most powerful 2 energy cards in Marvel Snap. I have her in the defining category because her role inside of clutter decks specifically is never replaceable, but it's also worth acknowledging that she sees play in a huge variety of decks, many of which she's just a generically good 2 energy card, meaning she can be subbed out. She's definitely a must-have for any clutter enjoyer, though. Ravonna Renslayer sees play in metadecks, often featuring Athena and Iron Man, as well as C and B tier things such as Mr. Negative and Living Tribunal. Wrap up our defining and strong category with the potent pairing of Null and X-23. If you want access to Destroy, these cards are a huge power level upgrade for it, and this archetype has been a consistently top performing deck in Marvel Snap's endgame meta for a long time. Our next group of cards is still archetype defining, but I would describe their power level as simply fine as opposed to strong or weak. I still think any of the cards in this grouping are really solid pickups if you're someone that enjoys the play patterns of the decks that they're contained in, since they are all cornerstones and their decks are not playable if you don't have them. Annihilus isn't quite the powerhouse that he once was, but his 3 card package when paired with Sentry and Hood is still a pretty reasonable set of stats that you can play in a variety of deck lists. It's also worth noting that with Viper recently being buffed to be a playable card, Annihilus can also act as a tech card of sorts against opposing clutter decks that are looking to send negative power things to your side of the board. High Evolutionary is honestly one of the best cards newer Marvel Snap players especially should prioritize picking up because he evolves the 7 vanilla cards that are guaranteed to be in your starting collection. He's effectively 7 new cards for you to play and brew with for the price of 1, and a number of iterations of High Evolutionary are fairly competitive. Ajax is a 5 energy stat stick who, when paired with Hazmat, can often get you 20 plus points of power for just 5 energy. I think this card is one more powerful enabler similar to Hazmat away from being a regular metagame powerhouse like Darkhawk has always been. Sebastian Shaw is a must-have card for Silver Surfer enjoyers, which is an archetype that has floated with A/B tier performance as the metagames ebb and flow. He's also started seeing play in some lower tier decks such as Hand Buff to great effect. We wrap up this category with 4 discard enablers: Modoc, Proxima Midnight, Corvus Glaive, and Meek. The first 2 of those, Modoc and Proxima Midnight, are definitely the 2 most important for having a fully powered discard deck since they add a lot of consistency and stats to the board for you. Corvus Glade, to a lesser extent, can be subbed out and still have your deck operate at a reasonable level. Finally, we're going to wrap up our archetype defining cards with ones that in recent memory at least are just pretty mediocre in terms of their overall power level. We kick off this group with 2 of Marvel Snap's big bads, Galactus and Thanos. These 2 cards do offer very unique play patterns overall, so I think they're still fine pickups from a novelty perspective, but they've both been iterated on / nerfed a number of times that they are far removed from their period of being metagame powerhouses. Black Swan, Hitmonkey, and Werewolf by Night are actually one of my personally favorite trio of cards. These are cornerstones in decks like Bounce and others that play out very strategically and, in my opinion, fun across the board on the last turns of the game. But there's no denying the fact that these deck lists have not consistently put up top tier metrics for a little bit, and these cards need to be played to perfection to get adequate power level out of them. Black Knight and Blink are previous top tier metagame cards, but the nerf to Hela was an indirect nerf to both of these since that was their premier deck, leaving them rotting down here in the mediocre category for the time being. Ghost Spider is a top tier move enabler, but move kinda sucks in Marvel Stat. Maybe you're watching this video after the September season and this rating is now drastically different, Copium. Phoenix Force is an incredibly powerful effect at face value, but it also requires 3 different moving pieces to come together, which is difficult to do by turn 4, which is typically when you need it for this card to pop off. Scar is a card that always feels this close to top tier to me, but ultimately just ends up getting overshadowed by more efficient cost reducers like Mockingbird or Stature. I personally have enjoyed Grandmaster inside of decks like Clutter and Hand Buff, but there's no denying the fact that its stats are consistently mediocre since it released. Beta Ray Bill is a must-have card if you're a Thor enjoyer. Curving Thor into Beta Ray Bill into Jane Foster is a pretty reasonable stat package that you can pair into a variety of things. That being said, that package hasn't been dominating the metagame by any means in some time. Pixie is an incredibly sweet build-around card that offers the highest of high rolls, but also worse than the lowest of low rolls because she can make your draws absolutely unplayable with the wrong shuffle and draw coming after you play her. I think Circe is probably a better card than her stats imply, but she's also a really high variance card that's going to create some feel bad moments that can be hard to get past when looking at her in an objective sense. Rod unfortunately gets outclassed in traditional destroy effects by more efficient threats like Deadpool. It does see some play inside of Phoenix Force as a backup plan, but that deck is rarely, if ever, a top performer. Elsa Bloodstone unfortunately just ain't what she used to be. With Thena being introduced to the game, she's kind of gotten mean girled out of the Kitty Pryde Angela package by more efficient newer cards. Finally, we wrap up our defining category with the Living Tribunal. This card headlines decks that are named after it and has a truly unique effect that allows you to split your power up across the board. Moving along to our replacement level but strong category, we have cards in this grouping that are all undeniably powerful by all of the metrics that we have and my own experience playing them, but they're also not cornerstones of any of the decks that they're contained in, meaning you can replace them with other similar cards from lower series typically and still go on playing the deck that they were initially contained in. Blob and Red Hulk are kind of the poster children for this category. They're both very good 6 energy cards, and there are plenty of spots where they will win the game that no other card can. But if you substitute them out for something like Magneto or Doctor Doom, those cards are also going to have niche spots where only they win the game, providing a similar effect. Similarly, Cassandra Nova, Copycat, and Gladiator are all stellar 3 energy cards that are the absolute best in slot in a number of situations, but they're also not strictly better than a variety of other good 3 energy cards you could be playing out in Curve that are going to be giving you upside in other niche spots. Jeff the Baby Landshark is probably objectively the best 2 energy card in Marvel Snap, but you can also substitute him for other lower series cards depending on the role that he fills in his given deck list. Nightcrawler if you need a different mover, or something like Medusa or Lizard if you need a generically good 2 energy play. Nebula and Spider-Ham are generically good 1 energy cards that allow you to fill your curve early in a variety of deck lists. My go-to replacement for either of these is typically something like Iceman that's going to have a disruptive effect that you can play out at any point to get value from. Iron Lad is a card that adds consistency to combo decks by letting you see 1 card deeper in your deck on the last turn of the game. Lower series substitutions for him are typically things like Magic, Crystal, or even Jubilee. Sage is a 3 energy stat stick that notably gets cost reduced by Ravonna Renslayer, with her go-to replacement being Wolfsbane, a card that checks those similar boxes. Loki's redesign means he's no longer a card that you build your deck around, and instead is just something of a value card that you can slot in for tech of sorts when you're playing into decks that are bad against themselves, such as Destroy, or when you're playing a deck like Arishem that wouldn't mind making itself smaller on occasion. Last of this category is Legion, who is a very potent location-changing card. He can be substituted out for a variety of the other cards that serve this role, but I think it is worth noting that Legion creates blowouts that no other card can frequently on the 6th turn of the game. Our next category is cards that are replacement level and just fine in terms of power level, in my opinion. I think all of these are cards where if you instantly have them in your Marvel Snap collection, they have reasonable homes where you're going to be happy to play with them and they can generate interesting games, but I also wouldn't recommend going out of your way to add them to your collection unless they're a character or playstyle that you absolutely love. For the sake of keeping this video manageable in terms of time, I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty details for this category and the Kang Tier coming up as I did for the ones above it, but for posterity's sake, let's go ahead and throw up on the screen real quick the cards that I think are replacement level and fine in power level. These are Hydra Bob, Alioth, Baron Zemo, Kyera, Dakin, Cull Obsidian, Havoc, Miss Marvel, Makari, Sasquatch, Silk, US Agent, Lady Deathstrike, Cannonball, Valentina, and Snowguard. Moving on to our Kang Tier, much like this category's namesake, all of the cards contained in here have basically never or rarely been found home in powerful metagame decks, and currently they're absolutely dookie in my opinion and not something that you should worry about picking up. Kang Tier cards right now, in my opinion, are Kang the Conqueror himself, Man-Thing, Phastos, Selene, Zabu, Hercules, Jean Grey, and maybe contentiously War Machine. Those of you who are paying attention will note that there are still a few more Series 4 and 5 cards I haven't covered, and that's because I don't think they fit cleanly into any of the groupings that I've already talked about today. The first of these group of cards are tech cards, i.e. cards that are interactive with your opponent that are fantastic to have in your collection to give you counterplay into certain metagames. These tech cards in Series 4 and 5 right now are Mobius M. Mobius, Red Guardian, and Supergiant. Last but not least, if you're a newer player to Marvel Snap and you came into this video looking for the easy answer, you want to know which cards you should definitely prioritize getting ASAP in my opinion, drum roll please, Nico Minaru and Nocturne, in my opinion, are two of the best Series 5 cards in Marvel Snap and have been since they were added to the game. They provide incredible amounts of utility. They can be played in a ton of different decks, and I think it is basically impossible for you to regret picking these cards up, sans when Nocturne betrays you on occasion. Thanks for making it all the way through to the end of this roundup. If you have any feedback on the format, I would love to hear it in the comments down below, since I think this video type is one that I can always improve on when I revisit it in the future. If you enjoyed my musings, make sure to snap that like button and ensure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any updated tier lists in the future or my handy dandy weekly best decks roundup that can always keep you one step ahead of the Marvel Snap meta game.